If I were to tell you, Rainworld has the most complex ecosystem of any game, you might go,
what?
Because though Rainworld is a 2D pixel art game where you play as a weird slug, the jaw-dropping complexity of its virtual biosphere has become legendary. Yet the most astonishing depths of Rainworld and its 2 major expansions still remain unexplored, which is why for this reimagined, full-length documentary, we'll be diving deeper into this vast, pixelated food chain than ever before. The original Rainworld begins with a cutscene showing a family of weasel-like creatures called slugcats struggling to survive. A storm breaks out, and a young slugcat, the protagonist, falls into the drains below, and awakens in a new and unknown environment. The game then quite literally drops you into the ecosystem. It's disorienting at first, but pretty quickly you learn how to live like a slugcat. In this world, you are small but crafty, able to catch and feed on tiny creatures like the fluttering bat flies. But from your first steps, the animation feels different, and that's because it is. Like most of the creatures you'll meet in Rainworld, the slugcat is procedurally animated, meaning its animation is determined in real time through code interacting with the game's environment. Since the dawn of traditional animation, the most natural way to get a creature to move has been to hand animate it moving frame by frame. But in Rainworld, a creature's motion happens organically within a set of predetermined, but still handcrafted, parameters, creating movement that feels uncannily spontaneous. One mind-blowing example of Rainworld's complexity are the lizards. These enemies move with procedural animation just like the slugcat, able to run across flat ground, crawl through tunnels, and climb up poles. But they take this to another level with their AI. To be clear, not generative AI, but old-school coding cleverness. When one lizard catches you, it will drag you back to its den. But if another lizard passes by, its AI will cause it to try and snatch you for itself, which can give you a dynamic opportunity to escape. But that's just scratching the surface of lizard complexity. Each lizard also has their own simulated personality based on 6 unique traits that determine how they interact with each other. And on top of that, there are 9 different types of lizards in the base game, all with their own distinctive abilities and behaviors. For example, yellow lizards have long antennae that allow them to communicate with each other, meaning their AIs work together to surround the slugcat or cut them off using the terrain. White lizards can camouflage with whatever pixels are behind them in the environment, so they hunt by staying completely still until the slugcat gets close, then lash out and try to pull the slugcat in with their long tongues. Cyan lizards can use bursts of energy to pull off incredible jumps that, when paired with their AI, leads to some of the most hilariously unpredictable movement patterns I've ever seen in a video game. Also, as fans of my original video pointed out, lizards, like all predators, don't just hunt the player specifically, but have full simulated lives even when not on screen. And there's another hidden system that can go completely unnoticed by the majority of players. If you consistently feed a lizard their preferred food, they will eventually become your ally and start following you around, and will even get into fights with other lizards that try to eat you. It's a surprisingly detailed system that shows just how meticulous Rainworld is when it comes to its ecosystem. In the next region of the game, far larger predators called vultures sometimes swoop in from above on nightmarish wings. Vultures will also climb after the player and squeeze through gaps, their procedural animation particularly uncanny. While vultures are intimidating, as scavengers, they can be scared off if you stand your ground and throw spears at them, which will sometimes cause them to drop their masks, seemingly foreshadowing some predators aren't entirely organic. If you hold a vulture's mask in front of you, most creatures will run from the player's slugcat, instinctually scared off by your resemblance to a top predator. Giant orange centipedes also lurk in the recesses of this ruined landscape. If one catches you, they'll emit a lethal electric shock. Like clockwork, the centipedes move with a cyclical sense of coordination. Indeed, much of Rainworld's ecosystem follows a similar pattern, with the titular rain that comes every so often marking the end of each cycle. When the rain falls, all lifeforms must hibernate or drown in the downpour. Soon, the player settles into these cycles and feels like a small part of a larger biosphere. Following the dripping pipes deeper underground, the slugcat plummets into a kingdom of waterlogged tunnels known as the drainage system. Swarms of leeches writhe in these half-flooded chambers. When the slugcat is close, the leech's AI causes them to go into a frenzy, following the slugcat's movements and waiting for the chance to latch on. If the slugcat slips, their best chance of survival is getting back above the water and shaking them off. For unlike the leeches of today, these bloodsuckers aren't just parasitic, they're predatory. Leech swarms coordinate to drag prey down into the depths, drowning whatever unfortunate creature they latch onto. Yet one species uses this to their advantage. Squid katas are cuttlefish-like creatures that flutter along on 4 small wings. To feed, squid katas have learned to fish for leeches by diving into the water and letting one latch on. The squid kata then flies off with the careless parasite, feeding on them a safe distance away. It's a remarkably dynamic behavior, and one you can go the whole game without seeing if you move too quickly. The drainage system eventually washes into the garbage wastes, an entire ecosystem of decaying junk. Yet there is life here, in the form of the inquisitive garbage worms. These long, stretchy creatures are something of a nuisance, with their curious nature causing them to steal spears from the slugcat when given the opportunity, often snatching them directly from the slugcat's hand. When no spears are in reach, garbage worms will instead stick their heads in the grime and start sucking up matter, suggesting that they feed on inorganic material. While normally passive, make a garbage worm angry and they will go on the attack, flinging the slugcat around with their heads or even holding the unlucky creature underwater in an attempt to drown them. Groups of garbage worms will even coordinate their attacks, their eyes turning red to indicate their hostility. In the murkiest depths of the garbage wastes, a true nightmare stirs. Hauling themselves up from the depths, the menacing brother longlegs probes for their next meal. Though made of a large, bulbous mass with several ravenous tentacles extending from their core, the brother longlegs are flexible enough to squeeze through tunnels. Unable to hear or see, they rely entirely on touch to find prey. And when a brother longlegs latches on, they refuse to let go, eventually wearing the creature out and dragging them into an unseen mouth. Where these monsters came from is a mystery that will stretch far into Rainworld's past and future, and can only be solved by venturing deeper into this hostile environment. The garbage wastes empty into the floodwaters of the Shoreline. Here, a drowned empire of crumbling monoliths greet the slugcat. It's impressive the sense of melancholy the pixels on screen can conjure. Blue leeches swim in these waters, a coastal variant that are larger and more aggressive than their red counterparts, able to pull the slugcat under in seconds. If you manage to avoid the leeches, there are far fouler dangers here. Even the plants of the shoreline are carnivorous, with the terrifying monster kelp ready to swallow you whole if you get too close. Sensitive to movement, monster kelp is difficult to sneak past. In pursuing the slugcat, these plants will twist and contort in unexpected ways, feeling particularly alive due to their adaptive behavior. Behind the scenes of the monster kelp's code, each strand of kelp moves in accordance with the slugcat's position instead of following a predetermined path. When paired with the game's physics system, the monster kelp feels truly unpredictable. And killer plants aren't the only threat below the waves. Packs of giant salamanders pursue the slugcat with lethal determination. Able to hunt on the land as well, these amphibious predators share the long tongues of lizards and seem to be a related species. The only defense the slugcat has is to swim with all their might. But for a quick boost of speed, the slugcat can catch a ride by grabbing onto a jetfish. These fast-moving aquatic lifeforms expel jets of liquid to create large amounts of momentum, which can be used to rocket out of the water. On land, jetfish aren't always the most graceful, but in the depths, they make exploring much easier. Yet dive too deep, and you'll find monsters. Leviathans are among Rainworld's largest and deadliest predators, able to outpace and swallow a slugcat in just a few seconds with their powerful, clamping jaws. Seemingly a mixture of metal and organic parts, Leviathans are the first definitive proof that not all life in Rainworld is naturally occurring, and the first taste of remarkable forms of life yet to come. For now, the beings who made the ruined artificial structures of Rainworld, a mysterious group called the Ancients, seem to have disappeared long ago. But there is another intelligent species that has learned to pick through their remains: the Scavengers. These early tool crafters might have the most impressive simulated minds across all of Rainworld. Scavenger behavior is insanely complex, not just in terms of how they interact with each other, but in terms of how they interact with you. Though it's easy to miss, Scavengers attempt to communicate with your player's slugcat through a litany of distinct gestures. If they think the slugcat is a threat, they'll point their spears at them. If you move closer, they'll try and send a warning by raising their spears up. If you persist, they won't hesitate to stick you full of spears. But if you play it cool, they'll do the same. All scavenger behaviors work on a reputation system, where they'll remember the player's actions and respond accordingly. For example, sometimes you'll come across places called tolls, where scavengers won't let you pass unless you trade them something interesting, and they even have a custom animation to let you know you haven't paid yet. But if you do trade something valuable like a pearl, they'll sort of wave you through, letting you know you're good. Trading gets more complicated with merchants, specific scavengers that can offer you unique technology. When a scavenger wants a specific item, they'll kind of paw at the ground or reach out to the item to let the slugcat know they'd like it. And if you give them the item, they'll drop something in return, like a lantern you can use to light your way through the dark, or blue orbs called flashbangs that release a disorienting burst to blind enemies. But if you take something from a merchant without offering anything in return, they'll go on the offensive, and scavengers won't just mindlessly chase after the slugcat and then give up. If your reputation gets low enough, they will actively seek the player out, even sending hit squads to the slugcat's general location. It all comes together to create encounters that at their best feel like you're interacting with something truly intelligent. But with a scavenger lantern in hand, the slugcat can at last explore the dark, decrepit wreckage of the Shaded Citadel, another ruin the Ancients left behind. Within the forgotten lower pathways, there's no telling what awaits. Monstrous wolf spiders scurry through the dark. Like most species in the Shaded Citadel, these spiders react dynamically to light sources, and will generally avoid your lantern, but given time, hunger overcomes fear. And where there is one wolf spider, there are invariably others. Best to keep your lantern close. But not all creatures in the Citadel are quite so horrifying. Lantern mice are passive, bioluminescent rodents that hang from the ceiling with their long tails. In these shadowy caverns, they are a welcome source of light. Lantern mice are notably skittish, and will run in a panic from the slugcat if they get too close. And lantern mice have good reason to be nervous. Skittering on countless legs are the aggressive coalescipedes. When they go on the attack, these disturbing predators resemble giant centipedes, yet in actuality, they are made up of numerous spiders that procedurally combine into a chain when on the attack. Because each spider is an independently coded enemy, getting swarmed feels all the more overwhelming. The best way to defeat the coalescipedes is with the bright light of a flashbang, which stops the scuttling terrors in their tracks. Eventually, the Shaded Citadel gives way to the bleak memory crypts. Patrolling this region like nightmarish sentries are the shadowy Miros birds. Though difficult to spot in the darkness, these creatures seem to be biomechanical, with metallic legs and scissor-like beaks. Flashbangs are the only effective deterrent, with the bright light causing their eyes to glitch different colors, allowing the slugcat to sneak past. Eventually, you arrive at the underside of a massive structure engulfed in a green electrical storm. Entering the structure, the slugcat finds many rooms lack gravity due to localized disruptors. These zero-gravity rooms can be challenging to move through, but the more you see, the more the entire structure comes to resemble a giant computer. And at the heart of the computer, a godlike artificial intelligence is waiting. This synthetic lifeform is another creation of the ancients, the mighty yet egotistical Five Pebbles. Using their incredible power, Five Pebbles alters the Slugcat's brain, allowing them to understand the ancients' language. Five Pebbles dispassionately tells the Slugcat that a form of ascension is waiting for them if they keep heading west, before turning the gravity back off and sending you away. Five Pebbles isn't the only one of these artificial minds, called iterators, that the ancients created. In a forgotten corner of the shoreline, the far kinder looks to the moon, rusts away in solitude. If you speak to her, she'll explain that artificial minds cannot ascend in the way the ancients or the Slugcat can, a limitation that has driven the iterators that still function to despair. The poignant tale of the iterators has many chapters to come. But for now, as the Slugcat leaves the Five Pebbles supercomputer, they need to sneak past the gargantuan Daddy Longlegs. These oversized relatives of the brother Longlegs can hear the Slugcat's footsteps, emitting blue rings of particles when a noise is detected. There are hidden lore details that suggest Five Pebbles is actually the one who created the Longlegs, one of many horribly failed attempts to fix a decaying world. Behind the scenes of the Longlegs code, each tentacle procedurally searches for surfaces to latch onto, creating an unsettling yet strikingly natural pattern of movement. Continuing along the underside, the Slugcat bumps into the bizarre grappling worms. These small tubular creatures suspend themselves from the walls on sticky pink appendages, a trait the Slugcat can take advantage of. By grabbing onto a worm, the Slugcat can use them like a living grappling hook to swing to new areas. To make their way to the place of ascension, the Slugcat must climb a massive exterior surface known simply as the Wall. And this region has perils of its own. Pole plants are cleverly hidden predators which, at a glance, look like any other pole to be climbed on. Get too close, and the plant-like carnivore will spring to life, flaring out its red leaves and dragging the Slugcat into its den to be devoured. Continuing to climb, the Slugcat is ambushed by a skilled predator known as the Dropwig, which drags them back to their nest. These insects resemble large earwigs and are experts at catching prey. After finding a good hiding spot on the ceiling, the Dropwig will place bait like spears beneath their perch to lure prey into an ambush. This behavior is an intriguing display of intelligence and makes the Dropwig a cunning adversary. At last, you reach the top of the Wall. Above the rain clouds for the first time in the base game, it's a rare, peaceful moment. Elsewhere atop the Wall, the player's Slugcat encounters a fascinating remnant of an ancient known as an Echo, which tells you the transcendence you're looking for is close at hand. The Echo says your struggles can all fade like a morning mist beneath the glory of the sun. By this point in the game, the player has faced so many dangers that it feels like the Echo is speaking directly to you. To reach your destination, you must first brave the dizzying heights of the Sky Islands. Flying centipedes called Centowings twist about in the atmosphere, undaunted by the formidable altitude. Peculiar insects called noodleflies also buzz about in this region. Though typically neutral, when threatened, they extend a retractable needle-like tip from their proboscis and attempt to spear the Slugcat clean through. With noodleflies abuzz, it is wise to move quickly. The Sky Islands give way to the expansive farm arrays, the second-to-last ecosystem before the end. This biosphere is dominated by wormgrass, hostile plant-like creatures that attempt to latch on and consume the Slugcat when it passes by. The best way to cross large fields of wormgrass is to hitch a ride on a reindeer. These towering lifeforms are the tallest land animals on Rainworld, and are able to step through the carnivorous fields thanks to their long, powerful legs. Since reindeer are one of the few truly peaceful species you can encounter, there's something soothing about their presence. At last, the player's Slugcat reaches the dim, dilapidated train tunnels of the subterranean ecosystem. The final stop on this great journey, the region seems grim at first, but eventually, the air begins to glow with a mysterious golden shimmer. and the shapes of ethereal sea life glimmer in the dark. This environment is truly spectacular and surreal, with the game squeezing the artistic power out of every last pixel. Eventually, the slugcat dives into a vast sea of glowing liquid called void fluid, seemingly the substance that allowed the ancients to ascend. And deep within this iridescent environment, a final creature is waiting. Coiling in the infinite expanse, the unfathomably vast void worm spirals within the fluid. This creature is by far the single largest life form in Rainworld, and calls the inky black abyss below the Golden Sea its home. A surprisingly inquisitive life form, we can get a glimpse of its unexpectedly small head when it comes to investigate the slugcat. Whether or not the void worm is the creator of the Void Sea or just an inhabitant is unknown. For almost everything about this cosmic creature and the transcendence its home offers is, at least for now, a mystery. Likewise, there are a lot of ways to interpret the original Rainworld's actual ending. On the surface level, you swim into the light surrounded by other slugcats. Are these members of the family you lost at the beginning of the game? Or is the Void Sea the ancients believed offered transcendence really just showing you what it thinks you want? You spend the whole game trying to rise above the ecosystem, to break out of the food web you find yourself in, but is such a thing truly possible? The deeper truths of Rainworld's setting, its secret musings on struggle and rebirth, are mysteries we can uncover by venturing beyond the biosphere of the original game and into new eras, with stranger environments and greater dangers. The first of these new eras we'll be braving is that of the recently released expansion, The Watcher, whose titular slugcat voyages further across space and time than any slugcat before or since. The Watcher's story begins with the young slugcat losing their family, much like the survivor slugcat of the original game. But unlike in the original game, the timid Watcher does not remain unaccompanied, for soon they encounter an echo named Spinning Top, a mighty yet childlike entity who can bend space-time itself, and who teleports the Watcher to a perilous new ecosystem. These half-flooded caverns are the Coral Caves, the small first taste of new lands and new predators. Packs of peach lizards prowl these terrestrial reefs and have evolved to be far more coordinated than any lizard species before. They'll pursue the slugcat even to the most extreme end. But it's not just slugcats the peach lizards are hungry for. Unassuming barnacles cling to the cavern walls, their overgrown shells so tough the Watcher can only shuck them with an explosive spear. But peach lizards have a simpler shucking approach. Their jaws are powerful enough to crack the shells open in a single bite. Barnacles are little more than wriggling meat sacks without their armor. The Watcher must learn to be a far tougher meal if they are to survive this journey. Voyaging through time to an era where groundwater has all but dried up, the Watcher ventures across the torrid desert, home to a far larger type of shelled contemporary. Though they might look intimidating, these drill crabs are extremely skittish, quick to retreat into their shells. But that doesn't mean they aren't dangerous. When a drill crab feels threatened, they fling their shells about with chaotic abandon, and while a narrow miss is one thing, a direct hit would be lethal. It's best to stay out of sight. But just under the sand is a creature that hides from the Watcher. Sand grubs are exceedingly slippery prey, and are also one of the only sources of food in this land, so the Watcher must learn to be very quick and ready to get their hands dirty. But some underground worms are a bit longer than expected. Full-grown sandworms are dangerous carnivores, with perilously flexible bodies and sinister determination. Walk without rhythm, or you'll attract the worm. Another crack in space-time, and Spinning Top transports the Watcher to new lands. The misty, shrouded stacks are the ruins of an old shipyard, yet the paint on these derelicts is somewhat fresh, raising questions about just how far back in time we'll be venturing. But for now, this astonishing era is home to astonishing lifeforms. Giant moths are exceptionally skilled navigators, traversing this environment in graceful herds. But just because they're graceful doesn't mean they're gentle giants. They're fiercely protective of their rather portly larvae. Giant moths will do anything to safeguard their young, from lashing out and draining a predator of life with their long proboscises, to trying to drag them away despite a severe difference in strength. But giant moths travel in groups, and a group of giants can dispose of predators with cold efficiency. It's best to be respectful. Yet the Watcher's voyages seem to be disrespecting the very stability of reality, for the ripples in time that Spinning Top is creating seem to have an adverse effect on existence itself. And with enough teleportation, the Watcher gains the ability to create ripples all on their own, tears in the ecosystem that harbor their own anomalous entities. While some of these wispy ripple spawns seem peaceful and aimless, distorting space can also attract the attention of the larger ripple amoebas, predatory matrices of energy that sap the Watcher of life when they get close. Such unique hunters are proof that the Watcher and Spinning Top's actions are taking them deep into uncharted territory, and may have yet unforeseen consequences. Though the next region the duo travels to almost makes all this reality bending seem worth it. The dizzying signal spires rise high above the clouds, creating an environment both stunning and tricky to navigate. It's a good thing there's a local taxi service. Enormous sky whales soar over the vast firmament, creatures that are happy to give the slugcat a ride if you manage to catch their whiskers. Refreshingly sociable, sky whales travel in large pods, for seemingly no reason other than they enjoy the company. After all, such sights are better shared with a friend or two. Our friend Spinning Top, however, seems yet unsatisfied with bending space, and transports the Watcher to the far more hostile Badlands. These windswept wastes are dominated by carnivorous swarms of locusts that will harass the slugcat to no end, and any other species unlucky or careless enough to get caught out in the open. Not even the drill crab's expert bouncing is enough to dissuade the hordes for very long. It's every life form for themselves. To make matters worse, these sands are also home to the burrowing indigo lizards, but they might offer an opportunity. Indigo lizard spit coats their victims in a sticky, foul chemical. So foul, in fact, that the locusts stay clear of it. In some ways, it's like a convenient form of natural insect repellent. One just has to make sure its dispenser doesn't catch you for real. For those who know its rules, the Badlands are quite survivable. The same cannot be said for the hostile expanse of the aptly named Desolate Tract. These windswept ruins are almost lifeless, but unfortunately, not completely. The horrid gelatinous loach will eat anything, including the slugcat. What they lack in senses, they make up for in sensitive tentacles exceedingly efficient at locating warm bodies. It's little wonder these wastes are so deserted, for when a loach corners you, there is almost nothing one can do. But the wastes give way to a far less windy region, a place that would be almost quaint were it not also tended to by ravenous locusts. There are no indigo lizards here, but there are giant, peaceful locust whales. These apparent relatives of the sky whales seem to feed on locusts the way a whale might feed on krill, serving as a useful distraction. Indeed, as long as a locust whale is around, the insect swarms feel less menacing and more miraculous. And some miracles are a great deal larger than others, as a massive locust whale soars overhead, a creature so lengthy even other whales look small in comparison, making it hard for the player not to feel a bit insignificant. Though no matter how insignificant one might feel, the truth is, Spinning Top and the Watcher's ripples are having a dangerous effect. A dangerous effect. The world is changing. With each new ripple, reality shifts closer to total collapse. The proof is when the Watcher teleports to a rotted version of an existing region, a grim possible future that all ecosystems might share should the tears continue. These infested wastes are home to the mutated rot lizards, creatures that in their first stage suffer from a few blue tendril-like growths, but eventually their entire bodies are overrun, and they become almost identical to the daddy longlegs and the rot they represent. Yet these tentacled nightmares maintain the abilities of their base lizard forms, making them even more threatening. In the same way cyan lizards can perform remarkable burst jumps, a rotted cyan lizard is equally unpredictable. And it's not just lizards the rot can infect, but even something as large as a loach. And the very native life of this realm seems allied with the rot. Bone shakers are bizarre extra-dimensional creatures that rattle when the slugcat gets too close, and push at the slugcat with long purple tendrils that seem like natural variants of the long-leg appendages, for they are just as maneuverable. It is surely imperative that this future does not come to pass. There's no sign Spinning Top will slow, however, as they send the Watcher into a particularly unstable part of reality. The Shattered Terrace is a late-game region of surreal winds and increasingly worrying anomalies. Skittering amongst these ruins are the exceedingly intelligent Scavenger disciples, far future descendants of the Scavengers that, while blind, can sense the Watcher through the use of golden karmic energy. This unique energy can be used to make defensive shields and powerful shockwaves. And when the shields aren't doing the trick, they'll also simply pelt the slugcat with carved boomerangs. Though crafty and aggressive, there is a certain holy power to these creatures, their golden light a karmic opposite to what the Watcher may tragically be unleashing. Plunging even further into the future, the Watcher comes upon an age of freezing cold. This is the surface. So far down the timeline, we've reached an era where most species will freeze in minutes, slugcats included. But there are some species that have become one with the storm. Blizzard lizards are creatures surrounded by a protective haze of gale force winds, a frigid power they can channel into icy beams of unstable intensity, or use to blow opponents off balance. Their beams in particular have so much force, they can knock the lizards themselves off their feet. Yet when it comes to surviving this grim, frozen tomorrow, there are no species more capable. Still, there are some time periods that are, if nothing else, quite balmy. The humid, rusted wrecks are home to an exceedingly colorful life form, the poisonous tardigrades. If you successfully hunt a tardigrade, you'll have a decent meal and a major stomachache. And navigating this environment while feeling off-color is astonishingly difficult. What's more, these wastes are plagued by frog-like, blood-sucking parasites. But in this case, being sapped of blood isn't such a bad thing. The frogs can inadvertently cycle the poison out of the slugcat system, making them right as rain. Another strange use for frogs is if you toss them at enemies, the foe will be drained of energy quite quickly. Sometimes survival requires outside-the-box thinking. And speaking of, the heat ducts are a confusing labyrinth of fire and steam. This region holds not only some of the most unique environmental challenges, but some of the most unique expressions of life. Fire sprites are hovering, phantasmic entities of tendrilled light. Though their movements are frantic, these sprites will sometimes come to rest and change their hue and body shape into a kind of prismatic fan. Exactly why fire sprites assume such dazzling forms is anyone's guess. Fire sprites incubate their orb-shaped larvae in strange, biomechanical creatures called boxworms. Larvae the Watcher can pull out if they're feeling peckish, but they do so at their own risk, because fire sprites can enter a distressed boxworm, and the typically sluggish creatures activate with a possessed malice. Fire sprite-inhabited boxworms will release scalding bursts of steam, and alert other possessed boxworms of the danger. It's better not to poke the hornet's nest. On the subject of hornets' nests, the Watcher and Spinning Top's continued warping seems to be not only weakening space-time, but spreading the rot as well. More and more regions are becoming infected, including a far future version of what appears to be Five Pebbles' Iterator Complex. Drifting through the zero-gravity, low-light environment, it seems every wall of the superstructure has been overrun with sickening gray rot so ancient it has become calcified. While Five Pebbles' own hubris was responsible for the rot spreading in the original game, it's hard not to wonder if this doomsday is the fault of the Watcher's own actions. And as if that idea wasn't worrying enough, behind various massive portholes drifts a titanic, rot-infested monster. A creature so unfathomably large, it appears most similar to the Void Worm from the climax of the original Rain World. If this rot worm is indeed the same type of godlike being overrun with infection, it's enough to make one wonder what hope is left for the future of this world. After such dizzying visions, it's nice to be back on solid ground, and while the gravity of the migration path is comparatively intense, it has nothing on the impact of the creatures that live here. In this remarkable era, the colossal tower crabs, evolved from the smaller drill crabs seen in ages past, are on the move. And what a movement it is! This is the single largest cross-ground migration anywhere in this world of rain, and one of the most remarkable sights in any time period. After so much rot and decay, it's strangely uplifting to witness such an overabundance of life. Perhaps there is hope for these lands yet. It is a bit more difficult, admittedly, to remain optimistic when voyaging across an ecosystem like the fetid Glen. Not only is this dark, mold-ridden biosphere hazy with toxic spores, the species that live here are similarly noxious. Basilisk lizards are so spore-infested, the very air distorts and time seems to slow when one ventures too close, as the Watcher's mind succumbs to their ambient infectiousness. Out of all the reptilian predators across the ages, there are perhaps none so foul as these basilisks. This glen is certainly no place to linger. Unfortunately, the waterlogged ecosystem of salination is perhaps even worse, as in this era, the Watcher finds naught but leaky pipes and dim, dark waters. The Watcher's luminescent body seems to be the only light in the labyrinthine plumbing, yet the only thing more dismal than traversing these pipes alone is brushing against something else swimming in the gloom. A second light shines in the dark, the lure of a ravenous angler. There is nothing more dangerous in these waters, though these hunters can at least not follow you onto dry land. But in an age as flooded as this one, that is little consolation. After voyaging across age upon age of trials and tribulations, it is surreal to at last reach the peaceful architecture of the ancient urban, the final region of the Watcher expansion. In the surprisingly ordinary sewers of the city, surprisingly ordinary rats scuttle about, the basis of a food chain far less hostile than any we've encountered so far. Moths also flutter about this region, but they too seem unusually unextreme, appearing to be the ancient ancestors of the far larger giant moths of the future. This raises the question, how far back has Spinning Top taken the Watcher to reach this era of peace? The answer is in the next room, as through a window, the enormous shadows of living ancients, the first we've ever glimpsed, can be seen. This is perhaps the only pre-apocalyptic region in the entire franchise, and a head-spinning change of pace after so much struggle. But why has Spinning Top brought the Watcher here? The answer lies in a small room, empty but for a few toys the Watcher can play with. Though not explicitly stated, it's implied this room once belonged to Spinning Top themselves before they were an Echo. Considering how much more childlike Spinning Top is compared to other Echoes, how much less aware they seem about the dangers of playing with space-time, it's likely they were a young ancient when they first became the trapped ghost they are today. And the Watcher, having lost their family, is also a lonely child in many ways. But in having spent time with Spinning Top, in being a friend to this young, friendless god, perhaps the Watcher has given them the courage to move on. "I will abandon this eternal waiting room," Spinning Top says in their final conversation with the Watcher. "I will step through the white door. I will accept what is next." There's more to say about the ending of Rainworld the Watcher, more to say about its deeper implications for the series, but there's also more than one ending. Because instead of venturing into the past and finding acceptance, the Watcher can instead venture into what seems to be further into the future, to a place of utter ruin. This doomed necropolis is the Outer Rim, a windswept nightmare devoid of life, save for the rot. The network of rot that connects this nightmarish period seems far more interlinked and intelligent than the rot of past eras, and all the rot seems to gather in a cathedral of decay, a place called the Throne where a mysterious mass appears to reign as grim monarch. And if you, the player, have come this far, it's hard to resist prodding at it, ripping more and more tears in the surrounding reality until eventually the mass opens and a mighty being called the Prince is born. This sovereign of infection almost resembles an infected version of an iterator like Five Pebbles. And like Five Pebbles, the Prince is intelligent, even able to speak. It tempts the Watcher to continue to make portals, to keep pulling reality apart so that it may spread its rot and feed. And after every future the player has seen, it feels like this is the genesis of how the world ends. That this is how it was always meant to be. But is rot and ruin truly the preordained end for this vast and ever-changing world? Or is there, perhaps, yet more to understand about Rainworld and the interplay between life and decay? There is one more expansion to explore, an expansion that will once again take us into the past and future, and complete the fascinating puzzle that is Rainworld's hidden lore. Rainworld Downpour, which is technically the second expansion, is a game about reinventing an ecosystem, about how precise changes to an environment and the creatures within it have an incredible effect on a simulated biosphere. Unlike the Watcher, there are 5 new slug cats in Downpour to play as, all of which feature not just new game-redefining abilities, but new regions suited for those abilities, set in unique time periods that hold their own secrets about the future of this land. So, let's reshuffle the roles of this virtual food chain. The first slug cat of Downpour is the Gourmand, a rather rotund creature that seems to have lived sometime before the events of the original game, and at a glance appears stuck at the bottom of the evolutionary heap. The Gourmand is unable to run as fast or climb as far as most slug cats. Even something as simple as throwing a spear will tire them out, causing them to enter a winded state until they can catch their breath. In the race to survive, the adorable Gourmand sadly doesn't seem like they'll cross the finish line. But they have an ability that changes everything. If you hold any 2 items in each hand, this clever foodie will combine them to create something new. Find yourself in a dark room? The Gourmand can combine glowing slime mold with a rock to create a lantern, or combine a gunpowder plant with a spore puff to create an explosive, or a beehive with a vulture grub to create a blinding flashbang. The sheer number of things you can make is completely nuts, as this chart from the wiki proves. And if you don't have ingredients, the resourceful Gourmand can simply cough one up at the cost of 1 food. They're the definition of work smarter, not harder. The Gourmand has other drawbacks, like how they need a more sizable stockpile of food to hibernate. But the more you play, the more you fall into the Gourmand's pattern of life. In one of the coolest tricks Downpour pulls, you learn to think like the slug cat you play as to survive in the ecosystem. The Gourmand's path eventually takes them to the new region of the Outer Expanse, a lush and lively environment dotted with ancient ruins. It would be paradise for a creature like the Gourmand, but there are other life forms in this garden. Caramel lizards are oversized, 6-legged brutes that can perform aggressive leaps to catch their prey. They also have the ability to spit projectiles that can knock the Gourmand down or stick them in place. Motivated by the promise of a tasty treat, these lizards will use every weapon at their disposal to try and catch the Gourmand. And like the lizards from the base game, these enemies are powered almost entirely by procedural animation and emergent behavior, which makes them feel like living organisms. But while not a master combatant, this slugcat has some very gourmand ways to handle threats. In a pinch, if they fall from enough height, they can stun enemies with their sheer bulk. Even better, if you give caramel lizards enough of the right type of food, you can turn them into your allies. For like the gourmand, they're fellow food lovers. Unfortunately, some creatures find nothing quite as tempting as the gourmand themselves. In the humid wetlands of the outer expanse, jungle leeches will try to latch on to the gourmand. These green leeches are able to stay out of the water for long periods without drying up, and slowly drain food from their hosts, get overwhelmed, and the gourmand becomes dessert. This jungle might not be the easiest environment for the gourmand to navigate, but the determined little slugcat will keep hauling themselves along. To make traversal easier, you can get a helping hand from the yeeks. These energetic, frog-like creatures are passive lifeforms that jump around incessantly, and if you grab hold of one, you can greatly increase your jumping ability. They especially come in handy in areas dense with wormgrass, which will try and pull the gourmand in to feed. Yeek traversal is another example of the gourmand using their intelligence to overcome their surroundings. Ultimately, the gourmand's journey is a story of learning to work your way up from the bottom of the food chain, and a story about appreciating the finer things in life. The ending suggests the gourmand becomes legendary among the slugcats for their near mythical palate, and while their actions might not seem to transform the world at large to the same extent of a slugcat like the Watcher, in many ways, slowing down and appreciating the delights of an ecosystem is what Rainworld is all about. And if you eat every type of food, it unlocks an incredible piece of post-game content that I'll reveal at the end of the video. But the next slugcat, the Artificer, isn't interested in the joys of life. Driven by an at first mysterious need for revenge, this aggressive creature is an expert in explosives, able to turn any regular spear into an explosive one, or cough up a grenade. The gourmand's opposite, the Artificer's weapons encourage an aggressive playstyle that can result in you blowing yourself up. But fortunately, the Artificer is immune to explosive damage. In fact, blowing themselves up is the main way they get around, as they can create small, mid-air explosions to give their jump extra height. While tricky to use at first, this explosive jump soon becomes integral to navigating the environment, and encourages you to approach movement with the same aggressive momentum as combat. But like the gourmand, the Artificer has downsides. Use the explosive jump too much, and you'll start smoking. And if you jump again, you'll be knocked unconscious. Ignore this warning, and it's game over. But while the Artificer is a danger to themselves, they are even more dangerous to their many enemies. For this rageful slugcat is hunting the most intelligent creatures in Rainworld, the Scavengers. In the original game, the advanced scavenger groups could be reasoned with, and would only attack if you caused trouble. But in this game, their simulated aggression is locked at maximum, and they'll use their considerable intelligence to try and take the Artificer out. As you move through the game, they'll send out assassination squads, set up ambushes, and even unleash their ultimate weapon, elite Scavengers. An eye-for-an-eye response to the Artificer's escalation. These hunters have unique masks and electrified spears that do extra damage. They're also considerably more mobile, able to leap long distances and smoke you out if you try and hide somewhere out of reach. It can feel like you're battling an autonomous intelligence instead of enemies in a video game. But what drives the Artificer to such extremes? Grim flashbacks that come in the form of dream sequences seem to imply that the Artificer once had 2 slugpup children, whose lives were tragically taken by scavengers. But were these the same scavengers they now hunt, or are they desperately seeking blind revenge against any unrelated groups? The Artificer's path of violence eventually leads them to the Metropolis, a crumbling ancient city you can access thanks to an ID drone that accidentally links with you. You're here to flush out scavengers, but even while you're on the warpath, it's hard not to be moved by the beautiful environments of this region, which tell a haunting story of a civilization that vanished. In some areas, technology still functions, with rooms that continue to glow with holographic displays. and even some low-gravity chambers home to neuron flies. These multicolored drone swarms seem to store data, and while they might seem defenseless, messing with them is a bad idea, for the neuron flies have a protector. Inspectors are bizarre, multi-headed artificial beings programmed to defend the neuron swarm at all costs. If you snag a fly, their bodies will flash red and then go on the offensive, flinging the artificer around the room or catching spears midair. And since each head seems to have their own programming, they're a unique challenge to outwit. The only way to defeat this mechanical hydra is to destroy all 3 heads, after which the inspector will explode. It seems wherever the artificer goes, destruction follows. If you continue to blaze a path onwards, you will eventually come face to face with the Chieftain Scavenger, a unique being that won't attack you outright, giving you a final chance to turn back. But at this point, you see the world as the Artificer does, and violence is likely your first instinct. If you do decide to battle the Chieftain, you're in for a fight more challenging than any other scavenger you've faced. No matter the outcome, however, the Artificer seems stuck in an endless cycle of destruction, and the expansion does a great job of pulling you into that cycle, encouraging you to tear through the ecosystem with explosive recklessness. Yet the next slugcat, the Rivulet, survives not through strength, but agility. The Rivulet can run faster, climb faster, and swim faster than a typical slugcat. And these adaptations are absolutely critical to the Rivulet's survival, as at this point in the timeline, the rain comes so frequently that the land has become a drowned kingdom of unending floods. Thankfully, the Rivulet is a perfect swimmer, so quick that they can outmaneuver creatures like the Leviathan, which in the base game were virtually impossible to escape from on your own. And thanks to the Rivulet's primitive gills, they can also stay underwater for long periods. But the Rivulet is not the only life form that is adapted to this new environment. Eels are aquatic hunters that slither in the bowels of this waterlogged dominion and seem to be an evolutionary offshoot of the lizards. They propel their sleek bodies through the water with their long, spiny tails, the bioluminescent glow of their heads casting an eerie light. In open waters, packs of eels will cut the Rivulet off from all angles. Their AI works a bit like the salamanders of the base game, if they had their reaction time and mobility dialed all the way up. But there are larger and more aggressive predators than eels in these waters. Aquapedes are another major threat to the Rivulet, huge aquatic centipedes with a bottomless appetite, seemingly a relative of the flying centowings that have turned their wings into flippers. Aquapedes make you think twice about taking a swim. Yet the more you play as the Rivulet, the more navigating the depths becomes second nature. Eventually, you gather the courage to dive deep into the submerged superstructure, a late-game region that is almost entirely underwater. And in these recesses, the deadliest aquatic predator skulks in the form of the giant jellyfish, occasionally spotted closer to the surface. These gargantuan siphonophores can sense prey through vibrations in the water. Move too much, and the giant jellyfish will send out their tentacles in pursuit of the Rivulet, dragging them in close and administering a lethal electric shock from an orb-shaped organ. Yet these tentacles have a maximum range, and if you're well practiced, you can lure the tentacles out, then swim right under them. But the more you navigate this flooded world, the more you wonder where these increased rains have come from. It's implied that these rising floodwaters are actually contributed to by Five Pebbles' overclocked coolant system, as by this point in the timeline, Five Pebbles themselves is badly malfunctioning. Far from the arrogant god they once were, this iterator is now remorseful for their actions, and begs the Rivulet to help them restore power to Looks to the Moon, an iterator that Five Pebbles wronged in the past. If you choose to help these discarded gods, Looks to the Moon holds no grudge, but tries to reach out to Five Pebbles in one of the more poignant dialogues across Rainworld. Time has changed these emotional machines, and it has changed you as well, as by the end of the Rivulet storyline, you truly feel like an Olympic swimmer, and are more at home in the water than on the land, despite the abundance of predators. But what about a slugcat that doesn't avoid predators, but is one? The Spearmaster is an apex predator that lives long before the age of the rivulet. Though at first unassuming, this ancient hunter can pull spear-like quills from its tail. When thrown, these spears can impale and drain the life from other organisms. And since the Spearmaster is unable to eat due to having no mouth, leeching off other species is the only way to stay alive. This seemingly simple change turns the entire game of Rainworld on its head, because now, instead of constantly being on the run from carnivores, you are the apex carnivore, seeking out other lifeforms and slowly draining them like a tiny vampire. Yet the Spearmaster is not invincible. It exists in an era where competition is fierce and predators are more numerous. And some predators are so dangerous, even a biological terror like the Spearmaster needs to be careful. Mother spiders are huge arachnids that scuttle in the dim corners of the region, their abdomens swollen due to carrying their brood. Attack one, and a horde of ravenous coalescipedes are unleashed, infant spiders that link together into a centipede-like formation to attack the player. This protective swarm can overwhelm the Spearmaster in seconds, which is why it is fortunate that mother spiders will avoid confrontations if you keep your distance. But not all predators offer this courtesy. Stowaways are near invisible ambush predators that impale their prey with long, fleshy tendrils, then pull them upwards towards their perch on the ceiling, where a mouth rimmed with jagged fangs swallows them whole. Battling stowaways is exceedingly risky, as one often doesn't spot them until it's too late. And it's not just the slugcat that the stowaway can catch off guard, as they'll eat anything they can drag up into their gullet. It can be hard not to feel outclassed as a predator when dealing with such effective hunters. And there is no hunter more effective than the mother longlegs. A primordial ancestor of the other longleg species, this artificial terror is a colossal mass that prowls the garbage wastes, feeding on anything that gets stuck in its web of tendrils. Although like its relatives unable to see, the mother longlegs reacts extra keenly to sound, able to lock onto prey if they make the slightest whisper. Yet while these terrors are virtually invincible, if you're careful, the Spearmaster can impale the mother longlegs and leech off their energy, proving that it's not the size of the hunter that matters, but the tenacity. And the more you settle into playing as the Spearmaster, the bolder you become, working your way up the food chain until everything feels like it's on the menu. Yet our final slugcat, who may exist at the absolute tail end of Rainworld's timeline, is the Spearmaster's spiritual opposite. The Saint is perhaps the most unique slugcat of all, because they are true pacifists. If you try to throw a spear, the Saint will toss it so that it spins uselessly through the air. Try to eat another animal, even something as small as a bug, and the Saint will become sick, crawling around in a dazed state. It's plants and fungi only for this slugcat. In the brutal ecosystem of Rainworld, the Saint seems hopelessly exposed. But they have a very unusual trick up their sleeve. Using a long, chameleon-like tongue as a grappling hook, they can lift themselves out of reach of hungry mouths. This tongue greatly increases their mobility, allowing them to swing themselves through the frozen environment they call home. For the Saint lives in an era where the land seems locked in a brutal ice age, much like the surface explored in The Watcher, although this perhaps takes place even later. In this period, unforgiving snowstorms cloak the desolate remains of the ecosystem in a funeral shroud of white. Stay out in the cold too long, and you will slowly freeze, with the Saint becoming paler and paler as their metabolism shuts down. The only way to endure this forsaken climate is to take frequent shelter. But this ecosystem is not completely barren. The pale strawberry lizards trudge through the snowstorm, managing to cling to life. And like all lizards from past eras, these Ice Age reptiles are predators. To catch the Saint, strawberry lizards have convergently evolved the same grapple-tongue method of locomotion, making them one of the most maneuverable and unpredictable predator species of any era. Using their tongue, the lizards will fling themselves at the Saint, grappling onto the ceiling next to them, or even onto the Saint themselves. Trying to anticipate how the lizard's AI will interact with the game's physics system is exceedingly difficult, making them a worthy rival to the agile Saint. Yet even in competition, it is hard not to feel strangely sorry for these lizards, who like you are doing all they can to survive in this endless winter. These are creatures of the snow, focused primarily on outlasting the cold. Not all creatures are interested in playing it cool, however. In the warm-hued region of the Rubicon, an underground locale exclusive to the Saints storyline, the hot-tempered firebugs are quick to go on the offensive. If you accidentally startle one, they will quite literally explode with anger, sending their eggs scattering and careening towards the Saint like a heat-seeking missile. Not one to forget a grudge. They will continue to pursue you until they find their target. It's best to behave like a Saint and give them no reason to get aggressive. Yet the final lifeform is as needlessly aggressive as the Saint is peaceful. Swooping in on massive wings, Miros vultures are a vortex of teeth and claws that give a whole new meaning to death from above. A horrific amalgamation of vultures and Miros birds, the Miros vulture is relentless in its path of destruction, moving through areas like a living natural disaster. If their beak that can slay you in one hit and the blades on their wings aren't enough, the Miros vulture's glowing eye can also unleash a laser that explodes with concussive force. But even this nightmare of a predator is often no match for the Saint's simple, passive avoidance. You can defeat Miros vultures the same way you can defeat the snow, by staying calm and waiting out the storm. Like all slugcats before it, playing as the Saint will eventually make you think like one, approaching all situations with a clear mind and avoiding fights instead of starting them. So the player is in an interesting headspace when they at last find the ruins of Five Pebbles, malfunctioning alone in the snow, his resources exhausted from saving looks to the moon. "Thank you for company," he says, without a hint of his past ire. You can, like the Saint you are, stay with this discarded creation as the cold slowly overtakes you. Two beings abandoned by their gods. There are times when playing the Saints campaign, or really any section of Rainworld, that the story feels like a meditation on decay, that no choice you make can offset the rot coming for all ecosystems, no matter how grand. And yet the small kindnesses you can show to your fellow beings still have an impact. Your choices matter, just as they did with Spinning Top. There are other endings to the Saints campaign, all of them deeply impenetrable and layered in dream logic. Honestly, how happy any ending feels really comes down to the player, but Rainworld has never been about endings. The experience of becoming part of an ecosystem, of surviving and thriving in a vibrant and changeable world, is a concept that chafes against any conclusive finale. Each of the 5 campaigns in Downpour dynamically changes the way you think about your place in the ecosystem, as do all of Rainworld's campaigns. There is always something new to experience, another layer of meaning to uncover. Oh, and as I mentioned before, if you fulfill all the requirements in the Gourmand's campaign, you unlock a very special final bonus. The next time you boot up the game, you might encounter one last creature, the Slug Pups. These adorable infant slugcats offer a new way to navigate the game, because now you can be a parent, and you can take the slug pups by the hand or carry them all the way to the end. You can also adopt more than one. Make sure you're ready for the extra responsibility though, because once a pup bonds with you, it becomes your duty to protect them from the dangers of Rainworld, which can be extremely stressful. But it's a brilliant hidden final system, with a shocking amount of depth. In the end, the Rainworld series features not only the most complex ecosystem I've ever seen, but endlessly interpretable musings on what it means to be part of a living biosphere. For every nightmarish beast, there's a moment of sublime calm. For every opportunity to wound, there's a chance to comfort. There's really nothing else like it. If you'd like to check out the original game, or any of its expansions, be aware that these games are exceedingly difficult. I've never felt more conscious of my vulnerable place in a virtual ecosystem than when battling this pixelated food web. And, while we've covered a lot here today, we couldn't cover everything, so there's even more to discover if you'd like to take the plunge yourself. Rainworld is a fascinating work of storytelling, one that means a lot to me, and to this channel. I feel very grateful for this game, and grateful for all of you who have stopped in over the years to hear me talk about it. So from the bottom of my heart, Thank you. Okay, but I still feel I have more to say. More to say about how I interpret Rainworld's story, more to say about its many endings, more to say about why I love it so much and how I even make these documentary videos. So, I've made another Rainworld video where I talk more openly about the game and my personal experiences with it. Kind of a dessert after this main course that's available right now only on Nebula. Nebula is an absolute buffet of a streaming service, to continue my food metaphor. It is stuffed full of exclusive, early, and ad-free videos from hundreds of the best creators on YouTube. It's garnished with exclusive, early, and ad-free videos from myself. I've got one on the smallest possible life form, one on dragon riders, one on kelpies, and like a ton of others. And to top it all off, it's less than $3 a month if you use my link on screen or in the description to get 50% off an annual subscription to Nebula. You can also now try it for free, and for 3 days get a taste of what myself and others are cooking on Nebula. Because I'm putting time and effort into my extra videos. These are well-seasoned videos. Alright, I gotta stop with the food metaphors. But seriously, Tier Zoo is dropping stuff weeks in advance, Jacob Geller has a multi-year backlog of bonus videos, and there are entire shows like Jetlag for you to binge. Lately, my favorite treat has been watching episodes of A Bit Obscure from the channel A Bit Frank, a great new show exploring haunted spaces that's equal parts spooky and just downright fascinating. And to get halfway serious for a second, Nebula is also the single best way to support this channel. All my Nebula subscribers are absolutely critical to letting me continue to make stuff for you all to enjoy. So, if you're a Curious Archive fan, this free trial period is a great time to see what Nebula is all about, and I hope you stick around. Also, if, like me, a monthly or yearly subscription model just isn't your thing, you can instead use my link to get an unlimited lifetime of Nebula access for a one-time payment of $300, which is a full $200 off for an account that will literally never expire. And, as I always like to remind people, if you'd like to share these videos, each Nebula subscriber automatically gets free, week-long guest passes so that friends and family can watch absolutely anything they want. You can also gift a month, a year, or even a lifetime of Nebula access using Nebula gift cards, just in time for the holidays. And that is the whole enchilada. 50% off exclusive early and ad-free videos, 3-day free trial period before that. I definitely just used another food metaphor. I'm hungry. I love these hour-long videos, but they take a while to record. Oh, and as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider lending your support by liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification icon to stay up to date on all things curious. See you in the next video.